everybody. Mad Derrick with Chiefs Digest here. Uh, wouldn't be surprised if you're all a little late showing because I'm a little early slash late, depending on how you look at it. A little under the weather this week, so I was trying to make up for that by showing up on time for the Q&A and getting it started a little early tonight. And then realized that I did not create the Q&A because I was under the weather. So that's why I know there's not many of you in here with any questions to start out with and everything. I'll try and anticipate some of your questions ahead of time and maybe get some answers in before you can get them all and start the rolling in and everything. A lot going on this week. Obviously, since we last talked on the Q&A, the Chiefs got the deal done with L'Jarius Sneed going to Tennessee Titans. I'll hold off on that and see just what questions you all have, since we've talked. I talked earlier today with Ryan Tracy, and obviously you heard Nick and I hopefully you heard us on the podcast on Sunday talking about the trade and our thoughts. If you have any questions about it, feel free to fire them in. I just want to answer when it comes to the L'Jarius trade and the situation. Kind of just want to see what all of your questions are rather than talking about it in general. And Jeremy, right off the bat, coming in with a great one. Because I anticipated you would have some thoughts about the new rules coming out of the NFL ownership meetings. And that is a big one right there, Jeremy, about the new kickoff rules. And see if I can bring it up here. NFL put out a chart, and if I can get it on screen for you, I will. Of just what it's going to look like, what the new kickoff rules will look like and everything, because it's going to be different. I know when the last week or so, when it started getting kind of leaked out about what the new kickoff rule was going to be, there was obviously some discussion and talking about it. I'm just not real sure if everybody really understands it quite yet. It's going to be weird. That's just the bottom line. It's going to be different. If you saw the XFL, it's going to be very similar to that. Actually, I think it's pretty much identical to the XFL rules. So if you saw anything of that, you'll definitely, see it. I know some people like Eric Galco said, part of it, said they tested it for 2 years before putting it into a live game. I think that's great. I would like to know more about the testing. I do anticipate that special teams coaches from around the league, and I'll see if I can pull this up since it's Eric Galco's graphic, and since I know he's been very involved in this rule, I don't think he would mind me sharing it with his credit, of course, what it looks like and everything if you haven't seen it. So let me pull it up here real quick. And when I as many windows as I always have open, it always takes me a couple of seconds to figure out what I'm doing and figuring out which tab I want to go live with. So bear with me. I think here we go. I think we got that one. Yay! We'll pull this one up here. And as you can see, it's different. All the players are going to be lined up except for the kicker, who will be back at the old 35 as usual. Everybody else is going to be lined up on the receiving team's 45-yard line. So they're between the 40 and the 45, where the kickoff team, all 10 other players are going to be able to line up. Obviously, you can see the kicker will still be back up on the old 35. There will be a 5-yard buffer between them and the receiving team. So you got the setup zone, who are going to be between the 30 and the 35. And then I believe, according to rules, the receiving team in the setup zone can have 9 players, which allows them to have 2 in the landing zone. That will make it interesting because the landing zone is the area in which, if the ball goes, then teams basically have to return it. From the goal line to the 20, they got to return it. If it goes into the end zone, and you're affecting my cold-addled brain right here. It goes in the end zone. I believe it comes out to the 35. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but that's my understanding. I know there were some different variations last few months have been going around, so I could have gotten one of the old versions in my head. But goes into the end zone, it's going to come out to the 35. If there's no fair catching in the landing zone, if the ball hits 30, thank you, Dr. Ozzie, it's going to come out to the 30. If it goes into the end zone, the landing zone is basically a forced return zone. Anything else is going to be kind of, not supposed to go anywhere else, essentially, unless there's a onside kick, which is a whole different animal and everything, which teams will be able to do. They just have to be able to declare it. Watching from the XFL, obviously it produced returns. That's what this is supposed to do. I think we'll see what happens, and producing returns isn't a bad thing. What the NFL doesn't want to do is that they don't want high speed collisions. So the idea is that, hey, if players in this kickoff zone, they can't move until the ball is touched. So in theory, you're not going to getting, guys on the kickoff team that have a 60-yard head of steam hitting into a ball carrier at high speed and taking them down. So that's the hope, is that it's going to do what they want, which is to promote more returns, but lessen high-speed collisions, which in theory will create fewer injuries. And I suppose if, you throw in you can't hip drop tackle, then even fewer injuries because of that. So we'll see. I mean, I'm very interested to hear about Dave Toub when we get a chance to speak to him and what he thinks of this. He wasn't a real fan of some of the changes that they made last year. I'll be interested to see what he thinks of this. Part of me anticipates that he is going to be a fan of these changes, because I think he's a fan of returns. He's confident in his coaching and his players that if they create more returns, it's going to be in his favor and his team's favor. We'll see if that's the case. It doesn't always work out that way, but I think, Dave Toub's of the philosophy that anything that creates more opportunities for his special teams to get involved and more opportunities to make plays, he's in favor of it, even if it doesn't always go his way. So I anticipate I would think that a lot of special teams coaches around the league will be okay with this. It's completely different. I mean, it's a change. I mean, I don't know how you can look at this and not say that it's just a major change the way you're playing football, and have been for a long, long time. It's a different look, completely and totally. So we will see. They'll go test it out this year, see what happens. If it, I think there's a couple of ways it could go. I mean, obviously, if they'll monitor injuries, if injuries go up, they're going to tweak it, and maybe we'll see what happens. A lot of things could happen if injuries go up on this play. If it produces a lot of returns, I think you'll probably see some tweaks to it as well. I mean, I think what the NFL wants to do is create a system where you get numbers to basically where probably the return game was 10 to 15 years ago. They want there to be the occasional kickoff return. They don't want a ton of them. They just want a few. They want special teams to be productive, but they don't want it to be an injury-riddled play. So I would anticipate this is the direction that we're going to go, and they're going to continue to tweak it until they find something that really works. The landing zone is an interesting thing. I mean, there's, depending upon how you staff it and position and where you position your returners. I think there's some opportunities for some trickiness, and especially when you got the players that close. I mean, I am of the philosophy that if you can get your kicker to squib it inside the 20 and get it on the ground, anything can happen. And the players are close enough at that point to make it a real, and once again, I have not, and this is the one thing, I mean, I have not seen the full reading of the rules. So I need to see I can't see how they're going to at any point this year or next year legislate loose balls or fumbles out of this play. So if your kicker is able to put it in the landing zone on the ground, it's going to be a free ball. So that, to me, is the one thing that could create a little interesting unintended consequence, because I don't know that was a big part of what happened in the XFL. But that, to me, looking at how NFL special team coaches are going to exploit that landing zone, to me, is the unintended consequence. So let's see what happens. It's going to be interesting, but I think it absolutely is going to favor teams that put a lot of attention on the special teams, and the Chiefs are one of those. So in theory, it could help out the Chiefs. We will see. I'm really interested just to see how it's implemented, how it's approached, how teams, try to take advantage of it. So it's really intriguing, Jeremy. I'm curious to see how it is. But whether I like it or not, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of to me, it's a wait and see. I mean, I just want to see how it comes out, how it's enforced, how it's utilized by teams, how it's defended, attacked, all of that. I don't know. I mean, I know, like I said, it's been used in the XFL. There's been a lot of study on this, a lot of discussion on this. So in theory, I think they've had a lot of holes poked in it, but the 32 special teams coaches in the NFL are among the best and the brightest when it comes to poking holes on special teams. So I'm interested to see how they pull about it and everything and how they attack it. Chad, any news on any free agent signing? Not that I've heard. Obviously with the L'Jarius Sneed trade, the Chiefs do have some salary cap space to have some room to maneuver. But nothing that I've heard as of yet that's in the works. I mean, obviously the Chiefs are keeping abreast of their own free agents, and I get, there's a lot of speculation now that the deal with L'Jarius is done, that's going to make it easier to bring back guys like Mike Dana and Donovan Smith, Mecole Hardman. I certainly anticipate that those are possibilities. If there's any smoke and fire there quite yet, not that I've come across, my phone or text or desk yet or anything like that. I wouldn't be surprised. But Chiefs are in it for the long game. I mean, they're in it for getting the best deals, and if that means waiting a little while to see getting some prices to come down in free agency. I mean, we are in a real lull right now. There's a few signings around the league here and there, but by and large, Chiefs are among a lot of teams. They're just kind of waiting and seeing to see what happens to the market. And now you're at that point, especially when players who are expecting a lot more money have to adjust to, the reality of what they're going to get and what's available in free agency. And we'll probably have a little bit of a lull here leading up into the draft. And then obviously you also get the lull leading up to the compensation window, and where teams, tend to wait until after the deadline in May so that they can sign free agents, and the team that loses and doesn't get any compensation. So there's always a little bit of a lull right there. But I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if the Chiefs did do something, up before the draft. Even now, I mean, they've got the room to maneuver. So if anything, a good deal comes their way, they'll get it done. I don't think there's anybody out there right now that the Chiefs feel that they have to get and beat anybody to. I mean, even like a Mike Dana. I mean, they want Mike Dana to come back, but they want Mike Dana on their terms. So they're not going to necessarily overpay to get some players back. That's why I think that they'll be quiet for now. Like I said, wouldn't surprise me if they got something done. But at the same time, it's more on the players at this point, coming down to where the Chiefs are as far as cost goes. Brandon, what is your thought on the $20 million cap? Who are we signing long-term soon? That's the other element of this. And I'm assuming you're talking just specifically about the cap space that frees up with L'Jarius being gone. I mean, the Chiefs can absolutely sign some free agents. They can do that. But the big part of, getting the L'Jarius Sneed trade done was that it does free up cap space to get extensions done with your 2021 class. Those players who are in their fourth year this year, you can get those extensions done. And so obviously the three big names in that group are Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith. Is there any movement as far as I've noticed getting those three deals done? No. Hasn't been any major smoke or fire yet there either. So we'll see. We'll wait and see what happens. But that's obviously one major benefit of getting the L'Jarius Sneed trade done. And that's the thing. I mean, that $20 million that the Chiefs were saving in the short term for 2024, it's going to go a lot of different ways. I mean, it can absolutely go to extensions. It can absolutely go to free agents this year. If you think for a second that, a few million of that dollars might not roll over and be something that eventually ends up in Trent McDuffie's pocket, and it wouldn't surprise me either. And Trent McDuffie was really the reason why, a big reason why the Chiefs didn't necessarily want a long-term deal with L'Jarius Sneed, because they would rather pay a 25, 26, and 27-year-old Trent McDuffie than a 28, 29, 30-year-old L'Jarius Sneed on a long-term deal. I mean, that's the way that these little puzzle pieces are put together. So, I mean, there's a lot, but they're not going to jump into anything. I mean, I think even with getting those extensions done, they're going to take their time and kind of do it slowly. Steam Demon, thank you once again for the support. Truly, truly appreciate you. You've contributed here before, and I really appreciate it. Always have some great questions. Watching Nick Wright talk about Dak not being signed. What if Jerry is thinking about letting Dak walk at the end of the season and draft Shedeur Sanders since he expected to fall forward to end the first round? Boy, wouldn't that be something? I mean, I hadn't really thought about that being the scenario, but that's a good one from Nick. I mean, it could absolutely be. I guess the question would be, would Prime have Shador doing an Eli with the Cowboys? I mean, we are talking about the Cowboys that haven't won anything in 20 years. So, 30 years now. So, I mean, I know he's a former Cowboy and all, and once a Cowboy was a Cowboy, but, hey, come on. I mean, if Prime, if Dion really wants his guy, wants his kid going to a premier organization that can win, does he really want to go to Dallas with Jerry? I don't know. I mean, I would almost think that there's something going on there, but would be interesting to see. I'd like to hear what Deion Sanders would think about his kid going to Dallas. Maybe that would be the perfect spot. And from a marketing standpoint, and from Deion being a Cowboy, can't get any better than that. But man, that's a really good one. And I'll admit, I mean, some of you know this because I've outed myself before. I grew up in Southwest Missouri, and when I was a kid, it was in the '80s. And Roger Staubach was still the Dallas Cowboys quarterback when I first started watching the NFL. And Roger Staubach was my favorite player when I was a little kid. And so I generally, in all sports, adopted two teams. I rooted for my closest team, which in most cases was Kansas City. I obviously had some St. Louis fandom too. A lot of that dropped away in 1985 for reasons that I'm sure you could all guess right now. And I went full Kansas City after 85. But, in Southwest Missouri, when I was a kid, the Cowboys were almost bigger than the Chiefs and probably bigger than the Cardinals in football for sure. So there was a lot of us who were Cowboys fans growing up, and I was a Cowboys fan. I was a Cowboys fan for a long time. I have some Cowboys gear behind me that's on the shelves that I shouldn't probably admit to, but I do have some Cowboy tendencies. So I know it's a live Chiefs Q&A, so I'm going to stop talking about the Cowboys, but I do have some interest in demons. So I'm intrigued by the question and which way that it goes. Thanks again for the question, Steven. I appreciate it. Sharon, enjoyed the 41 Mike wide receiver talk. Yes, if you did not catch it, Nick broke down the wide receiver class and really where who the Chiefs might be looking at every single round through the draft, even getting some of the possible late picks. And so if you didn't get to listen to that on Sunday, definitely you can catch it here on the YouTube channel, or the 41 is the Mike channel. But Nick always does a great job breaking down the film on that. He is ahead of me in the list, so I got to catch up. But Sharon, the likelihood of signing free agent Renfrow, then if which draft wide receiver would best fit? That's a good question because if the Chiefs were to sign somebody like Hunter Renfrow, then who would be the receiver of choice in that group? And that's a really good question. I mean, they're all different flavors. A couple that the Chiefs, as Nick explained, I think could definitely be interested in because I don't think it's necessarily any one they would have to fall in love with. I think there's quite a few that they could fall in love with, and it would make sense that they'd be interested in. I mean, I'm pretty sure that going beyond the big three, and I think it's going to be tough for the Chiefs to go and get Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to get any of those players. But, as far as being able to get the next group, I mean, hey, if Brian Thomas falls to a certain spot, I certainly could see the Chiefs getting involved. And that's whom I think that at least the type of receiver, and there's a couple there. I mean, Thomas is in that group, A.D. Mitchell from Texas, Keon Coleman from Florida, Troy Franklin, Oregon. Any of those big targets, that are big size receivers would be a Chiefs target for me. That's the one thing. I mean, even though Rashee Rice plays pretty big, I mean, he's still just, 6'1". So he's not that, tremendously big type. Now, there's some others that, I mean, they've got some of that Jamar Chase in them that just go up and get anything. And I think the Chiefs could be certainly interested in those receivers as well. But I mean, I would just be so fascinated in the size. I mean, if you added a big receiver along with what you've got with Rashee Rice, with the speed of Hollywood, with Travis out there, I mean, it would seem to me like now you've got 4 or 5 legitimate targets on the field at all times that would be a massive upgrade from what the Chiefs had last year. So even though it would, there would be some inexperience out there, I think size would be the number one thing. And I'm kind of bringing in Brandon's question here too about Worthy. I mean, Worthy's probably the one that worries me the most. And if the Chiefs drafted him, I would instantly have a lot more faith in it. I mean, I don't want to sound like this is one of those things where I'm just going to be, if I'm saying Xavier Worthy is a bad pick, but if the Chiefs make the pick, then all of a sudden I'm going to be like, it's a good pick. If the Chiefs take Xavier Worthy, it's going to tell me that they've done their homework, that they feel like that the concerns I have are not concerns, because the concerns I have with Worthy are that he's just too small. That he doesn't have the thickness, that he doesn't have the durability, he doesn't have the size to be able to hold up to the game. And that's the thing that Tyreek had. Tyreek was small. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Xavier is a bigger size receiver from a height standpoint, so it doesn't make the same thing, but he's 6'1", 172. I mean, that's not, I mean, Tyreek weighed more than that. And Tyreek even bulked up once he got to the league. So even though he was shorter, he was thicker. And the question is going to be, how much more can you put on that frame that you still have the explosiveness that makes him what he is, but also makes him durable enough that, Worthy is not going to, just fall down the first time it gets contact, or that he's not going to get banged up repeatedly from contact. You can endure that a little bit more at the college level, because the contact isn't necessarily always intense. Sometimes you don't get hit because you're faster than everybody else. Well, it's not going to happen at the NFL level. You're going to get hit a lot, and I just need to know if he can answer to that. And the Chiefs generally do their work on this, so and they do the math on it. So if Xavier Worthy, like I said, that's what worries me about Worthy, and why, based on the information I have, he probably wouldn't be at the top of my board. Now, if the Chiefs take him, then it is gonna convince me that they've done their homework and they feel better about that. My concerns won't completely go away, but they will diminish significantly, because I do think that they will have found something that they believe is the case, that would make sure that he's not going to have those issues that come into the NFL. So we'll see. But I think, this is a group that, and honestly, even if the Chiefs don't take a receiver at 32 or move up from 32 to get a receiver that they want, I think there's still decent chance. I mean, even looking at some of the projections, there's decent receivers all the way down to the end of the second round. So wouldn't necessarily be the best receiver, but the best receiver for Kansas City, maybe. I think Rashee Rice was that year, and the Chiefs identified him, they found him, and they got him. So maybe if there's someone else in that group, then maybe that's the ones they're going to find. So we'll see. Bring up Sean's question. You don't want Ladd McConkey, but have a comp of Hunter Renfrow. Want Brian Thomas or Xavier Leggett personally? And that's the thing. And you're talking about two guys there that, depending on, which draft board you look at, could be available at radically different positions, whereas Brian Thomas from LSU, and we talked about this, Nick and I, he helped alleviate some of my concerns there too, because we've seen what happens sometimes when you take the number 2 player off a team, and what happens there. Was the number 2 getting a lot of work and succeeding because number 1, because Malik Neighbors is getting a lot more balls and a lot more attention? Does that create more favorable matchups for Brian Thomas? Nick has alleviated my concerns there, that if Thomas is available, that he would be the right pick and the right spot for the Chiefs. But Leggett, once again, is a receiver that I like size-wise. I'm definitely intrigued by, especially once again with COVID year still being a factor. The sophomore year things don't worry me. Leggett's a senior. So there's a little bit of concern from just the age standpoint. I really like Jalen Polk too, from Washington, who would be in that same kind of category. I don't know, Sean, how you feel about Polk, but another 6'2". They're both receivers kind of in that at least bigger group category. So and Ladd McConkey's an interesting one. Ladd, I think, is going to be obviously a very popular, trendy pick to Kansas City, because he's generally considered probably a late first, early second kind of pick. So I would expect there's going to be a lot of attention given to him next month from Kansas City standpoint, because I think he's going to be mocked to the Chiefs quite a few times. And I'm going to be doing one of my first mock drafts this week, and we'll see what happens. But I don't know if I'll take Ladd McConkey or not, but he's definitely going to be on the list, because there's a lot of possibilities for the Chiefs there. Sorry, Dr. Ozzy, I had to get a drink of, and this is tea, by the way, so don't worry. I'm trying to be careful with my throat, and just tea. But Dr. Ozzy, what do you think about the whole discourse over a promise that may or may not have existed to renovate the practice facilities? And try not to repeat too much for those of you who may have caught me talking a little bit with Ryan Tracy over in Locked On Chiefs earlier today. But yeah, it's weird. Because that's not entirely clear that there was ever necessarily a promise made from Clark Hunt. Like he walked into a meeting one day with Chiefs players and said, "Hey, you've been all great, and because of that, we're going to go out and build you a new locker room and all this." I mean, and technically speaking, the Chiefs did build a new locker room. It was just over an Arrowhead that they only use 10, 12 times a year. So they got a really nice locker room over in Arrowhead. That's just not where they normally live. And they did get some really nice chairs in the locker room. I mean, that was something that we did notice, those chairs. Not being facetious entirely here. Those were nice chairs that they got. But it's not entirely clear whether this was just a bad game of telephone that, the players felt like that they were promised a new locker room over in the facility, or that there were commitments made to improving the facility and never done. It's a little bit of a he said, she said, maybe some misunderstandings and rumors that go around. I mean, I never heard specifically that they were going to build a new locker rooms, improve them over in Arrowhead from the players. I just heard that when the players got their new chairs, they were disappointed because they felt like they were going to get more than that. So once again, whether that was directly promised, I don't know. I mean, is a lot of this over the facilities a bit overdone? To me, it is. Just because NFL facilities across the league are not very nice. They're generally not, and the NFL survey generally pretty much reflects that. I mean, one thing that if you really go through the results and see it, most of the grades around the league are pretty bad on a lot of categories. And chances are, if you're an NFL player and you don't like your facilities and give them a really low grade, it might be because you've only played for one team and you have nothing to compare it to, because they're almost all pretty bad. I mean, especially when you consider how many of these players are coming from Power 5 programs, or even, mid-majors that have decent facilities because they have to for recruiting purposes. I mean, that is, a competitive advantage at the college level. It is not at the NFL level. A lot of players, and, Mitchell Schwartz has spoken eloquently about this, on social media. I mean, in the NFL, the only thing that matters is the number on the checks. That's what matters. The facilities generally don't. And I don't think they're a competitive advantage, and that's why a lot of, players and a lot of teams rather, and organizations don't put a lot into facilities. Is it about making players happy? Yeah. I mean, I think your players are going to be happy. Are there some coaches who don't want their players to be too happy? Probably so. And Andy Reid might be one of them. I don't know. He might not want the locker rooms to be too comfy. He might not want the, air conditioning in the indoor facility because he wants to put his team through some heck, and maybe doesn't want that. Now, I think one thing he would tell you for sure is that he'd like some different surface in the indoor facility because the turf in there is terrible. And, and they've had issues with, obviously in the past, older players would not practice when they go inside. That's, one of the reasons why Chiefs don't always have a lot of older players on the team. They definitely in these years go younger because they don't want any bad knees on those indoor facilities. I think that's making a little bit of that, much of that. But there's no doubt. I mean, the Chiefs would rather practice in a pouring rain or a driving blizzard than go into their indoor facility, just because it's not a fun place to be and the turf is terrible. Is anybody's indoor facility around the league significantly better? No. But I will pontificate on my big point that I made with Ryan earlier today too, which is that the one part of that NFLPA survey that I don't think that people are making enough of is Chiefs players and some of their specific complaints about training and physical therapy services, that they don't have enough trainers, that they don't have enough physical therapists, they don't have enough massage therapists to treat all their injuries, and especially pre-therapy. That was the one thing when I was asking JC Treader and talking to him in Indianapolis at the Combine about the complaints about the Chiefs, the first thing he went to when talking about anything was about the fact that, allegedly in Kansas City, you can't get pre-therapy, can't qualify for it. So if you go to one of the trainers, you go to Rick Burkholder and you say, hey, my hamstring's a little tight, unless it's affecting you on the field, you're not in line, you're not in priority to get treatment for that. And you might not get treatment for that and won't get treatment for it until it shows up on the injury report. And that's the problem for the players. And to me, that's a competitive disadvantage, because if you've got guys that are missing time because they've got a sore hamstring or a sore ankle or a sore calf, sore hips, you name it, anything like this, these soft tissue injuries, and the Chiefs, a couple of years ago, I asked Andy Reid about soft tissue injuries and trying to avoid them coming out of the COVID season and everything. And oh boy, I thought I was going to get my head ripped off there. Not something that the coaches like to talk about. And it's definitely not a favorite topic. So, but I think it's something significant that, that's the one thing in the NFLPA survey I think has been looked over the most is, and I did see, I think that Clark Hunt was asked about it today and said that they have enough staff. I don't think the Chiefs would agree with that and the players would agree with that, but that's an area I think definitely needs to be addressed. Duncan, I'm bringing this up not just because it was a very kind comment, because I thought it would be something nice to leave on the screen while I get more tea for my throat. So thank you. That's very kind of you, Duncan. Dirk. If we go tackle at 32, can Morris move to guard? We'll have him tested there. In theory, but I think that if the Chiefs were to get a left tackle at 32, I think what you'd probably be looking at is the beginning of the course correction of Wanya Morris being your starting right tackle in the future. And, and certainly for this year, Jawan Taylor would continue to be your guy on the right side. But, I think if I'm not mistaken on his contract, I think, next year would be the beginning of when you could kind of get away from him if you wanted to. So, yeah, I mean, the Chiefs did go that direction and got a left tackle at 32 for the future right now, and somebody who can start immediately, then, yeah, I think you would probably look more for Wanya moving to the right side. Guard is interesting, and that's why, it is sneaking up on me. I kind of dismissed it a little bit at first, but I've been giving it a little bit more consideration, and I do think there's an even a better chance that the Chiefs could look at an interior lineman early in the first or second round. It's not a high chance. I would only probably put it in like the 10 to 15% category, but I can see why they would do it, because if, one, Joe Thuney could be his last year, just from a price standpoint and age standpoint. So you got to be ready for Joe Thuney to go. You don't know that you're going to be able to sign Trey Smith. You don't know if you're going to be able to sign Crean Humphrey. One of those you might lose. I would anticipate that there's a decent chance that, if any of them the Chiefs might franchise would be Creed. They could, franchise Nick Bolton too. On one tag and 3 players. So somebody's going to be left out of the cold one way or another. Maybe 2 players, but somebody's going to end up getting the tag too. But because of that, you could see the Chiefs being in the need for a starting guard soon. So I could see that being a need for the future, especially if, you think that Wanya can be your starting left tackle, if not this year, then certainly in 25, or if you get a tackle at 32 and Wanya now is going to be your right tackle in 25. Now, would you look at getting a guard in this draft, so that you've got somebody ready for next year? I think there's a reasonable chance the Chiefs will take an interior lineman in the draft this year. Even though that they do like Mike Caliendo, and they've had some good success finding some talent at that spot, then I still think that there's a chance that they might go a different direction. And I'll bring in Duncan's question here. Can Joe Thuney play left tackle? Yeah, he can. Do I think it's likely? Probably not. It would be a big ask at his age to make that permanent change. He's still somebody who can do it at a drop of a hat. But I also think it'd be really tough to ask him to do that when he's probably not going to be on the field until training camp. So he, with that pec injury, certainly will not be 100% for OTAs, and he might not even take part in OTAs. So if that's the case, then you're really talking about how, he wouldn't get to work at that position until July. And that's a big ask. So I think, is Joe Thuney playing left tackle a possibility? Yeah, I think it's probably plan D or plan E. I don't think it's their first, second, or third choice. I think it's not further on down the line. But, they have that flexibility. That's one of the reasons why they paid him as much money as they did, because they felt like all along that, hey, barring injury, he was going to be the left guard of the future for the next 4 or 5 years, maybe beyond that. And that, hey, if in case of glass breaks, he could play left tackle. But it's an interesting question. I mean, both those directions. You could go tackle at 32. Could go guard later on. I mean, I know that if the Chiefs went tackle guard and with their first 2 picks in the draft, it would not make anybody happy, especially from getting a receiver standpoint. But I could definitely see them addressing both those positions in this year's draft. We'll see, but it's interesting. Lettrell asking, what grade do you think Clark Hunt will get next year from the NFLPA? Good question. I mean, honestly, well, one, I guess it will depend upon their survey and if they're going to change it. Because I do want to note that the NFL ownership grade was only based on one question, and that was about the ownership's willingness to invest in facilities. Wasn't based on anything else. And I think that was pretty poor methodology. I mean, I think there should be more questions that are tied to ownership. I know that they don't want to ask a ton of questions because they want to keep the survey short, sweet, and concise. But it feels like that there should be some other questions tied into that. Because honestly, I mean, feel like that, your questions about whether or not your team's, has enough physical therapists on staff, is tied to ownership. So I feel like anything that, results and links back to investment, whether it's in people or facilities, should probably reflect on the owner. So I still think they should, tweak their methodology. Do I think that the grade for that category is going to change a lot next year? Probably not. I mean, unless the Chiefs actually were to follow through on anything and make some significant changes between now and the survey will, I'm assuming, be conducted in November again this year. Then probably not. I mean, I don't see a lot of major changes, so the grade will probably be pretty similar. And honestly, the Chiefs' grades in most categories have been pretty similar the last few years. There's a couple areas where they improved. I know their travel grade went up a little bit. There's some areas where they were just as bad as they were before, and there were some areas where actually they got a lot worse. And that's one thing that their strength and conditioning categories got a lot worse. And I think that probably had a lot to do with the changeover with Barry Rubin retiring, and probably not necessarily a huge reflection on the new staff, but probably just a reflection of the fact that how much changed when Barry retired. And Barry was a legend, so maybe there was a little bit of wanting to acknowledge that a little bit, that, Barry was, much more popular in the locker room than maybe there was a way for the players to kind of give him a little shout out the door. But their strength and conditioning grades went down a lot. I'll be interested to see if those improve next year. We'll see, especially, with the staff getting in that kind of a second year and getting their feet under them and everything. Dr. Ozzie just saw Charles Goldman tweet about the Chiefs still have Sneed's cap hit because the transaction isn't official yet. Makes sense on them being quiet. Yeah, that's the thing, is that, no one is saying this thing is not going to go through. And I'm going to check it again. I checked earlier today. I don't believe, it's still, there's nothing that's gone through the NFL transaction yet, wire on L'Jarius. So technically speaking, it's still unofficial. It hasn't gone through the system yet. So that's why, you haven't seen anything. Our good friend Nick Jacobs is joining us. He knew that I was going to be probably going off a little early tonight because of my cold.
Hi.
And my throat. So he is joining us from his car.
I am. I'm outside of a Hy-Vee parking lot. There are helpful smiles everywhere. So, yeah. How's it going, Matt?
I think it's going okay. I mean, even though my throat is killing me.
Yeah, I can imagine, man.
How are you doing, my friend?
I mean, hey, doing some grocery shopping, getting that done. So
I was stealing as much of your takes as I possibly could from the podcast on Sunday talking about wide receivers. So
yeah. All right. Well, I'm here for you. You let me know what you need. I'm here for you.
I'll tell you what. The next question up, I'll go to Sean because this is one right up your alley, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know how much deep you've gotten into left tackle, but is Jordan Montgomery not getting more love as a more polished, ready year one left tackle due to playing in Arizona?
No, it's because I believe he tore his ACL. I think that has a lot more to do with it. I think he's coming off an ACL injury, if I remember correctly. Yes, athletically before that, he has promise and everything. I'll have to look up his arm length again. I had it written down. I don't know if it fits where the Chiefs are at, but I know a lot of people. Some people think he's going to be a tackle in the NFL. A lot of people think he's going to be a guard. So I think it's really divided on why you're not hearing as much about him, whether it could be injury, the belief in him being tackle or guard. He's on my list to watch later tonight. I got too caught up in Joe Alt, as you may imagine. Ended up watching 5 of those games last night. That's my fault. But you know what? I enjoyed every second of it.
I'm looking up his bio here and his measurables, and I get some bad news about his arm length. This says 32 and 7/8.
Yeah, no, it's got to be like 34.
Yeah.
Is it 34 and a half, I think?
Yeah, that's the arm length of a guard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
everything else, tackle.
I think that answers Sean's question.
Yeah, that would be yeah. And it's not good when you look up, and like I said, maybe I'll look at a second source to confirm that arm length. But when other numbers are in green, that usually means good. When your arm length is red on your draft bio, that's bad.
Yeah.
So he has a lot of greens, but yeah, 6'5", 6'6". Let's see. I don't know if you probably won't remember if he was at the combine for sure. That's what you should, because there's only like 300 players at the combine. So, but he may not have gone for that reason. But that would be the problem, yeah, Nick. If the arm length is not there, that would be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
KC Harold, with the draft capital that they have this year, plus the difficulty they had last year getting teams to trade with the Chiefs, do you think it's realistic that they will move up in this year's draft? We talked a little bit about this, Nick, but are both somewhat reasonably optimistic that there's more opportunity this year than maybe there was last year.
The L'Jarius Sneed trade had to happen to give them the necessary capital to attempt to move up into the high 20s. That was at minimum had to happen for them to potentially be able to get anything. So by getting that 3rd round pick, even though it's in 2025, it's a Tennessee Titans pick, and the league knows the Tennessee Titans, so it's going to be in the top 15 at minimum. And so like that was big for the Chiefs to get, because if you look at the draft capital number wise, that actually puts them. They could, I think the highest they could get up on is counting it up. They may have to add a little into it, but it would be around 20 to 21 is the highest they could get up. 22, they could comfortably get up with a next year 3rd round and their 32nd overall to get into that range. And that could get them maybe a tackle, maybe a wide receiver, or if there's somebody that drops that they're really intrigued by, they could do that. If they want to get much higher up in the draft than that, that's when that's going to involve either a 2nd or a future first. A future first is what it's going to take if you want to get in the top 15 or higher from where they're at. Like you're going to have to do that if that's where you want to go striking distance wise.
Yeah, as a quick aside, yes, at the combine, Jordan Morgan did participate, so he is healthy now. Combine numbers were good, but arm was 32 and 7/8. So
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, might be a tackle somewhere. I just can't imagine that being in Kansas City.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, the one thing I think that at least the Chiefs have going for them somewhat in that is that you're right. I mean, that's why the L'Jarius trade was big. It does give them some currency to be able to move up if they want to. But as we've discussed before, and I'm sure we'll touch on again, the draft board is at least favorable because there's a stretch from 22 through 27 that is all NFC teams. And we know that, last year, and there has been continued some unwillingness for AFC teams to always make trades with the Chiefs. And I think that's going to continue going forward. Last year, there was some unwillingness from NFC teams to trade because they were just afraid the Chiefs were going to take the guy they wanted. But the fact that there's a window there from 22 to 27 where it's all NFC teams, I think that actually makes it a little bit easier for Brett Veach. Because, hey, if the Buffalo Bills were at 23 rather than 28, I think they would certainly say when the Chiefs called them, yeah, no thanks, we're not doing that again. Mm-hmm. But hey, if you call the Minnesota Vikings, better chance. Although maybe not the Vikings in this situation because of their situation, but I think there's some teams that they could absolutely make some trades with and everything. So we'll see. Pran, what are your thoughts about signing Tyler Boyd in free agency? It's not a hard pass from you, Nick, but probably a soft pass.
I would like to see if you get Hunter Renfrow first, but if you get Boyd, you want to do that on 1 year prove-it deal with him being 30 years old already, and he would be a complimentary receiver in the slot position, and that's how you would utilize him. Do I want to eliminate it completely? No, because he's a veteran and he knows what he's doing, but you're going to want a guy you're going to need a player that can accept doing a 1 year type of deal. And with him, I don't know if he wants a 1 year, 2 year, what he may want. But the fact he's still in the market, and I know he's been linked to Pittsburgh a handful of weeks now, we'll see. But I mean, the Chiefs have room to where people are probably coming back to him now and be like, hey, you, hey, I like your team. I like all that money you got there. You want to work something out?
Yeah, I mean, I talked earlier about the fact that I think the Chiefs would be great. It would really help them out if they got a bigger targeted, bigger bodied receiver. I'd look at the draft for that. But if they can't get Renfro, I mean, Boyd would fit that bill for at least a season. It wouldn't be something long term, but you're right. I think it would be something to just if you felt like you needed that for a year, but that's not a long term investment for sure.
Right.
I'm going to go back to a couple of early questions, Nick, because there were some good ones that I just absolutely glossed over.
Here's what I ask you: how long are you going tonight?
I got 10 more.
10 more.
I probably have 10 more minutes of me.
All right. I'll stick on here in the parking lot just for you. Hopefully, my arm doesn't get tired and start drooping.
See, this is the off-season drills that reporters have to do. I every year, will stand there with my arm stuck out like this for 5 minutes, Nick, just to make sure I can do it during a scrum in the locker room.
Yeah, dude. I mean, those are that's the training stuff you got to do, man.
That's right.
I got to do 5 sets of 12 of that. Just holding it out there for 5 minutes at a time, 12 times a day.
Yeah. You really aren't ready for the regular season until you've held a microphone over Aaron Ladd's head, or shoulder, to make sure you can, hear an interview in their locker room. That's when you know you're ready for the season, Nick.
All right. Well, I mean, hey, you do what you got to do, man. Okay. I just, if I'm with Aaron, I'm like, hey, dude, you're the reporter. You want to hold the microphone? I'm the shooter.
Chris is touching on a question that has been background nightmare for me all day, Nick.
Yeah.
When does Wednesday Night Football become a regular thing on streaming? 25 or 26?
I don't think it will. I think they're dabbling this year with the Wednesday thing to see how the numbers do. And if the numbers don't do as first off, depending what games they put in there, what games they put in there is going to kind of decide that one. But with it being a Wednesday, first, I'm not really a fan of having having games on Christmas on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday to begin with. But I mean, hey, NFL is going to do what the NFL wants to do, and so they're going to do that. You and I both know that always opens up the window if the Chiefs are playing on Christmas because they got this guy named Mahomes that's guaranteed to get ratings no matter what. But the thought of them putting Mahomes on a Saturday game the week before just doesn't seem like a solid idea. But I don't know. We'll see what they end up doing. But logistically it doesn't seem like a great idea all around. I mean, like it's stretching it to move it past the Monday or Tuesday. I know they argue about how they were able to do stuff in COVID and everything, but yeah, those are extraordinary circumstances. Like this is, you're back to the normal world for the most part. I just don't see the purpose of putting a game on Wednesday. So personally, I mean, I guess if there's somebody willing to buy it, sure, but you've already maxed out how many streaming companies are buying from you right now to begin with, unless Apple wants to join the party.
Well, I mean, and they're going to reach a point. Maybe this would be the point. You're going to eventually stretch yourself into a pretzel so much, trying to fit in these kind of games because,
yeah,
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, no matter how you slice this, I mean, it feels like because there are a couple of ways you could do it, but one of the easiest ways you're going to do a Wednesday game every week. Rather than and I don't see because that's the other thing. I mean, there are some legal aspects to this as well, because remember the NFL doesn't have games on Saturday not because they choose to, but because they're legally basically prohibited from doing that. Yeah. There was legislation passed by Congress back in the 60s when there was concern that the NFL was going to kill off college football. that prevents the NFL from scheduling games on Saturday during the college football season, which is why the NFL only plays on Saturdays later in the season. So that's the only thing preventing them from, eventually going to every single day of the week. And then, the handshake agreement of not trying to kill off high school football, which they clearly don't care about anymore. But there are ways to do it. But the problem is that you have to give a team a bye week after playing on a Wednesday. That's really the only way you could do it to make it fair. And I don't know how you're going to, fit the schedule and everything else that you've got in it. And there's probably some team that would be ending up playing in Germany and playing on a Wednesday night and getting a bye week. And I mean, who knows the way the NFL just twists the schedule into a pretzel as it is already right now is amazing to me. And that's the problem, is that, as one of the premier franchises in the NFL, one team that's going to face the brunt of it's the Chiefs every single year. Because if they can squeeze them into a weird window, they're going to do it. And I'll bring in the news today that they're also going to change the rules for Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
That, playoff teams will now be eligible for Hard Knocks. And they're going to do an entire division for the in-season Hard Knocks. You can't convince me that the NFL has not already probably penciled in the AFC West as an in-season Hard Knocks as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah, I mean, look, Hard Knocks is awful at this point. Like the Dolphins in season 1 was terrible. Like, I mean, I'm sorry. It like there's so much that they took away from what they normally do. Like, just from a privacy perspective, I understand they had to do what they had to do, but it just, I'm sorry. It was boring. It was lifeless. I see how Mike McDaniels is as a coach now, and I know that's not going to work there long term. So that's really all I learned from the in-season Hard Knocks. And like they deliberately didn't start until like after the Chiefs game and everything, which I thought was weird too. So it just, I don't know. Collectively, I was just really underwhelmed with what Hard Knocks was overall. And I mean, we got to see the Jets and who they were last year and everything, and how much of a clown show they are overall. So I mean, really, at the end of the day, all you get from this and from Hard Knocks is just functional organizations. So and the competent organizations don't want to do it because they don't want distractions in their world. And so like the fact that Mahomes got to document his season was really cool for a quarterback to be able to kind of see that and see him and get that kind of look behind the scenes, but have it not be invasive. So Mahomes' situation kind of proved you can do it. You just, in all honesty, the way Hard Knocks is really going to have to approach it down the road is the team's own crews may have to be involved in kind of more of it, to where they're naturally just a part of it versus, you bringing in other crews and everything. But I don't know. Basically what it's getting to is every NFL team already does their own stuff to begin with, which is making Hard Knocks less and less relevant. So this is kind of a last ditch effort, in my opinion, for them to try to see if they can salvage it and make it marketable for HBO or whoever to buy. And then when the time comes, then they're like, yeah, we're not going to do this. It'll go the way the Inside the NFL did. I'm not going to name the network, but it reached its point, and Inside the NFL is a shell of its former self. So, yeah, no, I mean, this is where the NFL is kind of at a tipping point, to where they're going to have to figure out, with the digital world, how they want to go and how they want to approach things. And when you try to change something that's been working the way that it has, like Inside the NFL was and everything, and try to turn it into this new cool hip thing the way that they did, it just diluted the product to where it's worthless at this point. That name.
Well, and part of the the attraction and the allure of Hard Knocks has been that they get sad sack organizations and just expose what's wrong with them.
Right.
I mean, I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of drama watching Andy Reid not talk to anyone and silently put together a game plan in a room with Matt Nagy, because they're not going to. I mean, maybe every once in a while we'll get some. Although Andy Reid only pretty much drops his shield for about I don't know 45 seconds after a Super Bowl if Peter King's in the room. But other than that, you're not going to get anything from Andy Reid. So I think it would be pretty much watching paint dry most of the time. But I mean, you're not going to get the drama with a well-run organization because there's just not as much drama. But to your point, I think there's an excellent chance because I know that the NFL Films guys are saying like, yeah, we're going to do this, but we don't know how we're going to staff it. Well, you may have the answer, which is that it's going to be staffed with help from the teams, in which case it's going to be an even more sanitized version of what it is, which case it'll be the Chiefs franchise segment, which is great because we do learn stuff there. I mean, there are stories being told there we don't get anywhere else. They're just PG, G-rated, friendly versions of the stories. Hard Knocks used to have some edge to it.
Well, and that's the way of the NFL overall. Is they're not trying to have it be that. It didn't seem like they want it to be that anymore, or to have that edge to it, or anything like that, or have that kind of total access vibe and feel to it. So, I mean, it is what it is on that front. So, yeah, I mean, and the unfortunate part is with how good the franchise is and how good 65 Toss Power Trap does, and Rob Alberino's crew and everything they do, like that could potentially stretch them thin. And, maybe the franchises have to be stretched out a little bit more overall because they're having to help with NFL Films if it hypothetically was the AFC West, which in some cases I hope it isn't, because I'm good watching the franchise by itself right now and getting the Chiefs stories. I don't really care about how dysfunctional the Raiders are going to be or how big of a train wreck Sean Payton's going to be in Denver, or the fact that, hey, I hope they did a story on how many media members were at the Denver Broncos pancake breakfast yesterday before Sean Payton was interviewed, which we got that again. I don't know if you saw that. I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm going a little bit right here. It's nothing to do with it, but if your biggest accomplishment is that you had enough people at a pancake breakfast table to interview a coach, then that tells me you had a lot of time on your hands in the off season to do other things, while the media members that cover Super Bowls and things of that nature are just trying to give themselves a couple weeks of rest mentally in between the start of it, which tells me where two different franchises are at. So in a way, they may think it's a humble brag, but here's a fun idea. It means that the franchise you're covering is worthless. I'm sorry. I'm just speaking fact.
No, there is no doubt about it. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, and the rules about Hard Knocks in itself, because you couldn't be a playoff team and you couldn't be a team with a new head coach. So it meant that you just had to be a really crummy team that had some experience. So, and those are usually the biggest train wrecks. So,
yeah.
I mean, you can't beat a bad team with experience. One more question for you, Nick, and then I'm going to let your arm go. You and I,
I'm actually good. I'm resting it. We're good.
You and I haven't had a chance to talk about this, so I wanted to get your feelings on it. Jeremy had asked the first question I answered tonight, my thoughts, but we'll finish with yours. Your thoughts about the new kickoff rules?
I enjoyed watching them in the XFL. So I mean, yeah, the NFL. Like, here's what the NFL does, and this is what people don't truly appreciate about them. They let other people be the guinea pigs and test run stuff and see where the problems are, to where they don't necessarily have to have it associated with their brand at the time. And then if it's something that does well enough or works out well enough, they're like, you know what? We'll add that in. We're going to add that in now. And then they may change it a little bit. Instead of making it short yards, it's 10 yards or whatever little twist and spin they put on it today. But part of it, they're trying to reduce concussions, which is totally fine. They're doing something new to make it exciting, since it's not an exciting play anymore. So they're trying to figure out a way to keep it exciting, reduce concussions, and the XFL already did all the heavy lifting of what they're going to have to do problem-solving wise. And then most of the special teams coaches can get the tape at XFL, look at what they did, and then start figuring out blocking schemes that make it unique. That can make it exciting for about 9 weeks, and the rest of the league copies. And then you're right back to where you don't know what you're doing again with it. And you don't know. So it tests the creativity of special teams coaches for about half a season. Then everybody catches up to it. And then it's just a matter of, can you get 3 guys to block in a spot where you have enough speed at returner to do it? So there are factors that can make it intriguing, give it a tactical advantage, all that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, though, I mean, it's, they want to reduce concussions, but it's at the end, it's just they're going to they're going to reduce what the play is, what the play means, and how much it does matter.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I do think that it's going to be how these coaches attack it, and if there's anybody who can find a wrinkle in the rules to take advantage of, and then like you said, everybody around the league starts copycatting it and everything. We will see what happens.
I put up 3 of the kick returns that went for touchdowns and how they went about them. So the blocking scheme of how you do it's already out there. It's just a matter of how creative can you be and how well can you hit the timing of some of those reverses before your returner gets laid out. And are you okay with him getting laid out on that reverse with how short the runtime is in between it?
Here's a good quick one for you, Nick. With the new kickoff rule, would that be a good fit for Kadarius Toney's skills?
Is he going to be on the field? Is he going to be healthy?
Let's theoretically say yes.
I mean, maybe, as long as he runs forward and doesn't razzle dazzle step around, because there's not much wiggle room here to do the dance revolution like he's trying to get a high score in a thing. You're gonna have to run straight forward and run through some people like Cordell Patterson. Yeah, it's gonna work for him. Jamal Agnew, yeah, they got top end speed. They can get pretty quick. So how quick a guy gets to top end speed in 10 to 15 yards actually will kind of determine a lot of what this can and can't be, or how much it can and can't do. But I mean, like, if Kadarius Toney's on the roster to be a special teams performer, that's fine. But with the track record of the way that guy gets hurt, I mean, it is what it is. And then he'll post on Instagram afterwards about how everybody's against him. So, rinse and repeat, Matt. Rinse and repeat.
This is my, I think, third final question for you. But I want to go lightning round, and then I'm definitely letting you go for just 2 lightning round questions, Nick.
I don't believe you anymore. You've lied to me.
I swear to it. A lot of Chiefs are banking on Najee Johnson to fill the big void with L'Jarius' departure. Pono doesn't see it. He doesn't have the proven experience. Your thoughts?
Who didn't have the proven experience? Najee
Johnson.
Okay,
I can't dispute that.
Look, here's the thing. We talked about it on the podcast, and I'm going to say it every single time something like this comes up. The Chiefs are going to have to evolve. Like, who Najee Johnson is, who Jalen Watson is, who Joshua Williams is, who Trent McDuffie are. They're all different players that have different skill sets. Dave Merritt just brings out the best in all of them. And that's why bringing him back is such a big part of why you were comfortable letting L'Jarius Sneed go to the Tennessee Titans before whatever happens with that knee happens potentially. But like, you're going to have to evolve. It's not going to be the same defense it was last year. In a lot of ways, you don't want it to be, because offenses were going to figure out ways to scheme around that. So now they don't know, again, what the Chiefs aren't going to do. So that creates a mystery again. So whether Najee Johnson fills that spot or whether Chamari Connor fills that spot, who knows? I mean, they may do some parts of the skill set that L'Jarius did, but L'Jarius had to develop too and didn't become the rock star he was till year 3 and year 4. So, I mean, you got to trust in Dave Merritt. You got to trust in Steve Spagnuolo, putting him in the best position to succeed. And they're going to be what they're going to be. But to try to say that this person is going to be exactly like L'Jarius, or this person has to be like L'Jarius, or this person isn't. No, they're going to evolve like they do every year, and they're going to put themselves in a position to do well in the playoffs, get to an AFC championship, and then we'll see if they got enough to get to the Super Bowl. That's kind of been the rinse and repeat formula for the past 6 years. So until something happens otherwise, that's just the trajectory they're on. Can that trajectory change? You bet. But, I mean, that's just the way things have been going.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. The last time that we saw Najee Johnson on a field at training camp, it's hard to argue with the statement or the claim that he was ahead of Josh Williams and Jalen Watson at that point in development last year. He appeared to have taken a huge leap, and that coaching of Dave Merritt and everything was obviously a huge part of that. Now, What we don't know is in the period of time since then, how has his recovery gone? How is the development? We don't know what he's going to be when he gets back on the field. I don't know what he's going to be. I mean, There's absolutely reason to be optimistic because of how good he looked the last time he was on the field. But yeah, I mean, I'm not penciling him in as a starter, but to me, it's absolutely, you're the Chiefs. You feel fine where you are with losing Sneed, because it's not just Najee Johnson. It's that you have tremendous depth there. You've got Jalen Watson, you got Joshua Williams, you've got Nick Jones, you've got 3 other players at least that you could pencil in front of him if necessary. And we're not even talking about undrafted guys. Echo Boydo is still around, and the success that Dave Merritt has had and Steve Spagnuolo together with identifying second, third, and undrafted talent, second and third day and undrafted talent, and turning them into productive corners. I mean, that's what I'm banking on. It's not any one individual.
Yeah.
All right, this one is indeed the final lightning round question and the final question of the day, Nick.
It's gonna be, because I'm leaving at this point.
I told you 2, and this is the second of the 2. But this one's more
is like the 5th last question.
Well, it's the second one since I told you there was only 2 more. But this one really is for your skill set. Keon Coleman will be the DK Metcalf of this draft class. Question mark?
I don't personally see the comparison, but we'll find out. I'm not going to discount them and say that they're 100% wrong, but I mean, I don't know.
Can Keon change direction?
Not at the same rate that DK could coming out, because the thing about DK coming out was that DK, people had questions about him and AJ Brown in the route tree because of what they ran at Ole Miss. And then, then people got to do pro day workouts and all that type of stuff. And they were like, oh, yeah, no, they're fine. We're good. But that's what you were hearing in the media over and over again was about that part of it. And ironically, their wide receivers coach at Ole Miss is at Missouri. And DK was back there at the pro day this past Friday, if I remember correctly. So
he was.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. So, when I watched Keon Coleman, I didn't think DK Metcalf comparison when I watched him, but I'm not going to sit here and 100% say that's not going to happen, because there's been guys I watched tape of before that, that they surprised me. So that was I turned my truck on to give lighting for this, and it was telling me I need to stop because my battery was not working out with that thing.
Well, I don't want your battery to run down, Nick, and luckily that is the last question. So,
yeah.
And as Luttrell says, Nick's ice cream is going to melt if we don't let him go. So
I actually don't have ice cream, and I don't have anything frozen, but my milk is going to get warm.
Well,
and so are the new batch of Niners tiers I got. Those are gonna.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, if you didn't get any ice cream, you should go back and get some ice cream. But because I am going to go get some Bluebell milk chocolate ice cream on my sore throat to make it feel better. And
I like your style, man.
If Bluebell wants to sponsor, the live Q&A, that should be enough of a reason why.
There are a lot of things that can sponsor the Q&A, the podcast that we mentioned. Like, I'm literally sitting outside the Hy-Vee parking lot in Liberty doing this. So I hope so. If they if they want to sponsor, I see an Olive Garden over there. There's a Wendy's. I would promote the Chick-fil-A, but they're closed down for remodeling until summer. So can't go there. Got to go all the way over on Berry Road.
That is my Chick-fil-A. So I'm counting down the days, Nick.
Yeah, well, you and me both, buddy. But seriously, my truck is warning me I need to start this thing.
Well, thanks for coming in, and like Casey your help. Thanks for the pit stop with us tonight, Nick.
Hey, I did what I could, man. Sorry, the lighting looks terrible. I don't know how it sounds, but hey, I hope we all had fun. And if you didn't get your question answered, you want me to answer. Once this pops up on YouTube, write it down there, and I'll look through it tonight when I get some time.
Absolutely, that's the way to go. Even though I'm behind on my questions, that's what I'm going to do now, Nick. I'm going to go get a bowl of ice cream, and then I'm going to answer questions on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, whoever puts YouTube, put them in the comment section. Just anybody who has it didn't get answered, put it in the comment section afterwards. Matt can answer them. I can answer them. And just remember, # Jacob's Cares. Okay? All
right. There you go. Thanks, friends. Take care, everybody.
See you.
And we will be back next Tuesday. Nick would hopefully once again join us. And once again, also always get it. If you don't get us here, you can also get us on the 41 is the Mic every Sunday on the podcast. This Sunday, after last week, going through all the wide receivers. So if you need to go back through that and catch up on the wide receiver talk, we'll be doing tackles this week, which is why I was really glad to hear that it's Tuesday and Nick has already progressed past Joe Alt, because that was the one that was going to hold him up. He was going to be watching Joe Alt all week, I was pretty sure, and just wishing that the Chiefs could somehow draft him. But, Nick, he is going to be up until like 5 in the morning watching tackles all week. So I got to go catch up with him, start watching tackles after I answer some questions on the YouTube channel and eat some ice cream. So thanks, everybody. Have a great week, and we will all catch you later.